My phone changed too. Ethan Lee rubbed his throbbing head, a gnawing hunger twisting in his gut. Outside, the occasional, bone-chilling roars echoed through the air. He'd gotten used to them by now, but when he glanced at his desk and saw his phone, dead for a month, no battery left, he froze, his expression flickering with surprise. 45 days ago, a virus swept across the globe like wildfire. Anyone infected turned into the kind of zombie you'd see in movies. Mindless, shambling husks, aimlessly wandering until they caught the scent of fresh human flesh or heard a sound. Then, they'd transform into ferocious predators. Their speed would roughly double. Not as fast as a healthy human, but their sheer numbers made them deadly. The worst part? One bite, one scratch breaking the skin, and the virus would take hold. You'd be left waiting to die. Slowly, you'd lose your mind, becoming nothing but a primal, instinct-driven zombie. The few humans lucky enough to survive could only hide in the shadows, clinging to life. Ethan was one of them. He'd always been a bit of a shut-in. After losing his parents early, they left him a modest 500-square-foot apartment. With some coding skills to his name, he'd managed to get by comfortably enough, living a carefree, solitary life. The day the virus hit, he was holed up at home, which saved him from being turned into one of them. Being a recluse had its perks. His place was stocked with enough food to last a while, letting him scrape by for about half a month. But even so, his supplies ran dry 2 weeks ago, leaving him scrounging for scraps. Ethan had no choice but to ration, enduring days of gnawing hunger. His long stretches indoors had left him weak. Neither his stamina nor his frail body could handle venturing out to scavenge. Opening the door meant facing the zombies in the hallway, and they wouldn't show mercy. He still remembered his neighbor, a jacked personal trainer, who couldn't stand the hunger any longer. The guy went out and got torn apart by a pack of zombies, their teeth ripping into him until he was gone. His remains were probably still being fought over. Going outside was suicide. But yesterday, Ethan hit rock bottom. His food was gone. He had no choice but to eat what little he had left, sleep to regain some strength, and prepare to go out in search of supplies. He wasn't the type to just wait for death. Sure, stepping outside might mean a slim chance of survival, but starving in his apartment felt too pathetic a way to go. When he woke up, though, his phone had changed. What used to be a cheap, sturdy knockoff smartphone was now a sleek, translucent crystal slab the size of his palm. It screamed high-tech. A faint glow pulsed across its screen. After the apocalypse hit, power and water had been cut off within days. His phone hadn't lasted long after that, sitting dead and untouched for a month, collecting dust. Ethan approached it cautiously, his shock quickly giving way to calm. The end of the world had already arrived. His capacity for surprise was wearing thin. He picked up the strange device, inspecting it carefully. It was impossibly light and easy to carry. The screen looked like any other smartphone's, showing a full 100% battery. But the home screen was oddly clean, with just one app. Super Mario. The game was a cultural icon, a piece of every American kid's childhood. Ethan knew it well. Back in the day, he'd been pretty good at it, too. After studying the phone for a bit, he couldn't find anything else unusual about it. Curious, he tapped the Super Mario icon. Ding! Super Mario game activated. 20% battery consumed. A cold, emotionless robotic voice echoed in his mind. Caught off guard, Ethan glanced at the phone. Sure enough, the battery had dropped to 80%. "Who's there?" he called out, trying to communicate with the voice. No response. It was like shouting into the void. He gave up, but questions swirled in his head. How was this phone supposed to recharge? There was no charging port. Even if there was, it wouldn't matter. Electricity was long gone, and every gadget was now a paperweight. Suddenly, a glowing screen materialized in front of him, floating in midair. It was just the right size, displaying the familiar Super Mario start menu, identical to the one burned into his childhood memories. The phone in his hand morphed into a game controller. Ethan's curiosity deepened. What was this mutated phone capable of? The floating screen, and that mysterious voice hinted at something extraordinary. Gripping the controller, he stared at the screen and selected Start. A mustachioed character in red and blue overalls appeared before him. The levels, the visuals, the music, it was all exactly as he remembered. Ethan expertly navigated Mario forward. Soon, he encountered the first Goomba. He dodged it, then grabbed a mushroom to grow bigger. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Disappointment crept in. Was this just some cosmic joke, a toy to pass the time in the apocalypse? Before the world ended, he might have found it cool. Now, with survival on the line, who had time for games? He was about to quit when he stomped the first Goomba flat. Ding! Strength +1. The cold, robotic voice rang out again. As the voice faded, a faint warmth coursed through Ethan's body. Maybe it was his imagination, but the weakness that had plagued him seemed to ease, if only slightly. Even his spirits lifted a bit. The sensation was so subtle he couldn't be sure it was real. Ethan shook his head, forcing himself to stay sharp, his eyes glued to the phone screen. He couldn't afford to let his character die. Deep down, a spark of excitement flickered. If this was real, could playing this game actually improve his physical condition? Ethan quickly maneuvered Mario to squash another Goomba. Ding! Strength +1. The voice rang out again. Another surge of warmth pulsed through him, more noticeable this time, thanks to his intense focus. His body felt alive, brimming with a vitality he hadn't known in years. Ethan's grip on the controller trembled slightly. His hunch was right. This mutated phone, playing this game, was actually boosting his strength. At his lowest moment, this phone had appeared like a lifeline. Ethan swallowed hard, refocusing on the glowing screen. If this were just a regular game, he wouldn't care so much. But right now, this game was his salvation. Each time he started it, it drained 20% of the battery, meaning he had only 5 chances until he figured out how to recharge the phone. Every life was precious. Ding! Strength +1. Ding! Strength +1. Ding! Strength +1. The cold, robotic voice became music to his ears. Each notification brought a clear improvement in his condition. Years of staying cooped up had left his body frail, riddled with minor ailments and weakness. But now, with each point added to his strength, he could feel his body surging with newfound energy. Damn it! Ethan's face paled. As the levels got tougher, stomping Goombas became trickier. A moment of carelessness, combined with the pressure, cost him. He died on the second stage of the first world. His heart sank. What a waste of a chance to grow stronger. Taking a deep breath, he steadied himself. He carefully assessed his body's changes. After gaining roughly a few dozen strength points, he felt invigorated, like he hadn't in years. That vibrant energy, the kind he only remembered from his youth, was back. His strength had returned to a normal level, maybe even a bit beyond. He was hooked. It wasn't anything crazy, just about average for a healthy person, perhaps with a slight edge in power. But for Ethan, it was more than enough. In this apocalypse, even a small boost in strength could massively increase his odds of survival. Calmer now, Ethan started his second game. Ding! Game started. 20% battery consumed. As expected, the voice chimed in. Glancing at the phone, now down to 60% battery, Ethan winced but refocused and dove back into the game. Ding! Strength +1. Ding! Strength +1. Ding! Strength +1. He lost himself in the rhythm of those glorious notifications. As sunlight began to pierce through the heavy curtains, the room slowly brightened. Ethan lifted his stiff neck, wanting to check the time, only to realize the phone's battery was completely drained. He played 5 rounds in total. Though his skills improved with each attempt, he never made it past 10 minutes. Even so, the cumulative effect of those 5 runs had pushed his physical condition to an almost exaggerated level. Ethan casually lifted one end of his couch. It felt effortless. Before, moving that couch would have taken every ounce of his strength. Made mostly of solid wood, it weighed about 500 pounds. Now, he could lift one end with a single hand. That meant his strength was roughly around 200 pounds, 3 times what it used to be. Back then, carrying groceries upstairs left him winded. Now, 500-pound couch? No problem. He could probably go toe-to-toe with that personal trainer neighbor in terms of raw power. Lifting 200 pounds with one hand, that surpassed most ordinary people. He could hoist a grown man with ease. No sweat, but staring at the grayed-out phone screen, Ethan's brows furrowed. He was certain his phone didn't rely on electricity to charge. There had to be another way. He tried communicating with it, but got no response. Gurgle. His stomach growled fiercely, protesting its emptiness. A hunger unlike anything he'd felt before surged through him. He'd overlooked something obvious. As his strength increased, so did his body's demand for food. Already starving, Ethan now realized that without sustenance, his newfound strength would fade. Whether it was finding a way to recharge the phone or simply surviving, he had to go out and scavenge for food. Ethan steeled himself, a glint of resolve in his eyes. In this apocalypse, hesitation meant death. He headed to the kitchen, grabbing a cleaver and a rolling pin, his only weapons. Standing at the door, he hesitated for a moment. Then, with a surge of determination, Ethan flung open the door that had stayed sealed for over a month. The harsh sunlight outside made Ethan squint. Then a thick, rancid stench hit him, worse than a sewer's rot. He nearly gagged, barely holding it together. A zombie stood right in front of him. Even though Ethan had braced himself mentally, the sight of it made him let out an instinctive yelp. Half its face was gone, just raw, exposed bone. One arm dangled loosely, held together only by strips of flesh. Maggots wriggled in the open wounds. Less than 2 feet separated them. Ethan vaguely recognized it. His neighbor from across the hall, a mechanic, still wearing a red jumpsuit. As Ethan locked eyes with it, the mechanic zombie seemed to pause, almost confused. But the scent of fresh flesh snapped it out of its daze. A guttural growl rumbled from its throat, and it lunged. Ethan was faster. He swung the rolling pin with all his might, smashing it into the zombie's head. The force was explosive. Its skull burst like a watermelon, and it crumpled to the ground. Ethan's phone, tucked in his pocket, suddenly flickered to life. But he didn't notice. 5 more zombies in the hallway, including the hulking personal trainer, had zeroed in on him. The stench kept assaulting his senses. Though these zombies posed little threat to his enhanced strength, Ethan stayed on high alert. One mistake, one scratch, and he was done. He also didn't want to draw the attention of the zombies downstairs. They were sensitive to sound, a lesson he'd learned from careful observation while holed up. Even a small noise from his apartment could stir them. Thwack! Another swing of the rolling pin dropped an elderly zombie instantly. Ethan moved like a machine, taking out the other 4 with ease. Even the trainer, who looked intimidating, couldn't withstand a single hit from Ethan's cleaver and rolling pin combo. He stood, drenched in sweat, panting heavily. The fight had been harrowing, but as his breathing steadied, Ethan looked at the scattered corpses and felt like he was in a dream. Zombies, feared by everyone, had fallen so easily under his hands. All thanks to those 5 rounds of Super Mario, boosting his strength beyond what he'd thought possible. The old Ethan would have struggled against 2 zombies, let alone 4. Their sudden bursts of speed were no joke. The real challenge was overcoming his own fear. Realizing they weren't as tough as he'd imagined, Ethan let out a relieved breath. He began searching the apartments. Some zombies he encountered fell quickly under his attacks. The hallway floor was soon littered with bodies, roughly 20 by his count. But his face darkened. After scouring every accessible room, he found no food. Locked doors or windows posed too great a risk. Prying them open or breaking glass could attract more zombies, so he avoided them. He'd swept through every open apartment, but only found a bag of bok choy and a smoked sausage. Heading downstairs meant reaching the first floor. Fortune favors the bold, Ethan muttered, a steely glint in his eyes. Crouching by the staircase, he wolfed down the bok choy and sausage, savoring the taste after so long without food. Then he headed down. He vaguely recalled a small convenience store about 100 meters to the left of his building. It wouldn't have much, but it'd be enough to keep him going. If he moved fast and stayed quiet, he could grab supplies and get back safely. Peering down to the first floor, he assessed the situation. His apartment complex, tucked away in a quiet corner of the city, wasn't a main entrance, so the zombie presence wasn't overwhelming. Between the hallway and the store, he spotted about a dozen zombies scattered sparsely. But in the distance, he could see at least 100 more, wandering aimlessly. He needed to take out the closer ones without alerting the horde, then sprint to the store and secure the door. Plan set, Ethan tensed his muscles, ready to explode into action. He burst forward. An elderly zombie with white hair spotted him first. Before she could react, he took her down. Ethan moved like lightning. With his full strength unleashed, the 100-meter dash felt short. A few swings of his rolling pin dropped the dozen zombies in quick succession. In a flash, Ethan reached the convenience store and slipped inside, slamming the flimsy door shut. The store plunged into darkness. Exhausted, Ethan was about to collapse and rest when, in the dim light, he noticed a figure crouched just inches away. It was hunched over, head bobbing like it was eating. Every hair on Ethan's body stood on end, his pupils shrinking in terror. The figure in a garish floral shirt had its back to Ethan. He recognized him instantly, the convenience store owner. Ethan used to shop here often. The man's skin had a dark, ashen hue, showing no signs of decay. Ethan took a step forward, hoping to confirm if he was a survivor. But when the owner turned, Ethan froze. Clutched in his arms was a woman's corpse, dressed in blue jeans, soaked in blood. The owner's face was rotted, bits of flesh and blood clinging to his mouth. Zombie. The moment it saw Ethan, it lunged. Without hesitation, Ethan swung his cleaver. The sharp blade, backed by his full strength, nearly severed the zombie's neck, lodging in the bone. Ethan yanked, but the blade wouldn't budge. He followed up with a heavy strike from the rolling pin. The owner's head exploded, and it went still. Ethan exhaled in relief, kicking the corpse to free his cleaver. He cursed under his breath. TV shows made it look easy, slicing through necks in one swing. In reality, it was nearly impossible. Even with his enhanced strength, cutting clean through a zombie's neck was a pipe dream. Bones were too tough. His cleaver's edge was even slightly dulled. For good measure, Ethan smashed the female corpse's head, ensuring it wouldn't rise. He scanned the store. At barely 100 square feet, there were no hiding spots. After neutralizing all threats, he glanced at the woman's body, a pang of grim surprise hitting him. Someone, a girl, had made it here before him. She must have snuck through, dodging zombies, taking every back alley and corner to reach the store, only to meet a zombie waiting for her. Ethan felt no pity. In this apocalypse, everyone was on edge, and everyone had their own fate. His priority was survival. The store's shelves were sparse. Ethan tore open a pack of bread and devoured it, chugging a bottle of water nearby. The food hit his stomach, neutralizing the acid and converting into energy, restoring his strength. Before he knew it, the floor was littered with empty wrappers. Ethan blinked, stunned. His appetite was monstrous, 5 times what it used to be. He shrugged it off. After starving for so long, and with his boosted strength, a bigger appetite made sense. Grabbing a pack of cigarettes from the counter, he lit one up, sitting for a moment. The smoke filled his lungs, calming him with a familiar sensation. After about 10 minutes, feeling his stamina return, he stood. He pocketed a few packs of cigarettes and a lighter, then found 2 large backpacks. He swept the shelves, stuffing the bags until they bulged with food. With the packs slung over his shoulders, cleaver and rolling pin in hand, Ethan opened the store's door. The zombies outside had already been cleared, leaving the area eerily quiet. No new ones had wandered in. Ethan let out a small breath of relief, but stayed vigilant, scanning his surroundings. His plan was to head home and figure out how to recharge the phone. It was his lifeline in this apocalypse. If he could keep boosting his strength, could he become superhuman? The thought excited him, but as he turned to glance left, he noticed a curtain in a first-floor apartment suddenly pull back. A striking young woman stood there. She looked frail, her ginseng visibly drained. Her long black hair was slightly disheveled. By her features alone, she was flawless. Ethan would score her an 85 to 90 out of 100. Her pajamas hugged an impressive figure, adding to her appeal. Ethan was caught off guard. He hadn't expected someone this beautiful in his complex. If he'd seen her before, he'd remember, but he had no recollection. Then again, he rarely left his apartment and barely knew his own neighbors, let alone those in the next building. Her face was pale with worry. In her hands, she held a large white sheet of paper with bold words scrawled across it. "Please save me." The letters were huge, readable even from several meters away. Ethan gave a faint smirk. She was gorgeous, with a killer figure and sharp enough to avoid shouting, which would have drawn zombies. If she'd made that mistake, threatening his safety, Ethan wouldn't hesitate to deal with her, beauty or not. But he only spared her a glance before moving on. The girl's eyes widened as Ethan ignored her, his expression cold. Panic set in. After a moment's hesitation, she gritted her teeth and scribbled frantically on the paper, nearly covering it with new words. "I'll give you everything if you save me." Ethan saw the message and rubbed his chin. The offer was clear and tempting. It meant she'd be his, fully, if he rescued her. But he shook his head, kept walking, and quickly climbed the stairs back to his apartment. The girl's eyes, flickering with faint hope, dimmed as Ethan's figure vanished from view. Ethan wasn't a saint. He knew that in this apocalypse, survival meant knowing your limits. If he grew strong enough to protect himself, and maybe others, he'd consider saving that girl. After all, with the food he'd gathered, he wouldn't go hungry for a while. But rescuing her meant risking his life against more zombies. For now, Ethan wasn't willing to take that chance. His focus was on boosting his own strength. Selfish? Maybe. Cold? Sure. In this world, survival was all that mattered. Everything else was irrelevant. Ethan set the food down and grabbed a bottle of water, rinsing the rolling pin and cleaver. No one could say for sure if zombie blood carried the virus. He was still in the dark about that. Then he sprawled on the couch. With food secured, the constant sense of danger finally eased. He could survive a bit longer. That put him in a good mood. Lighting another cigarette, the faint click of the lighter echoed in the room. Since he cleared the zombies outside, he didn't need to be as cautious. Normal sounds wouldn't attract them, and even if one or two showed up, Ethan could handle them easily. After finishing the cigarette, he pulled out the mutated phone, ready to study it. But as he did, he noticed a faint glow. The phone, which had been dead, was now lit up again. The battery showed 32%. Ethan sat up, alert, and lit another cigarette, puffing thoughtfully. Does it recharge on its own? He dismissed the idea quickly. The phone had been dead for a while in his apartment, and his trip to the store and back took less than half an hour. Yet it now had 32% battery. What did I do when I went out? Ethan sank into thought. Zombies. His eyes lit up as it clicked. That's it, zombies. The 32% battery roughly matched the number of zombies he'd killed, around 30 or so. He couldn't be exact, but he was almost certain. The phone recharged by killing zombies. Each one gave about 1% battery. Realizing this, Ethan's excitement surged. This meant he could keep boosting his strength. Eagerly, he opened Super Mario. Ding! Game started. 20% battery consumed. The game launched. Ding! Strength +1. Ding! Strength +1. Ding! Strength +1. The familiar, glorious sound pulled him back in. Ethan felt his body growing stronger with each moment. This time, his control over the game was sharper than ever, his focus unbreakable. Level after level passed without a single mistake. His strength kept climbing steadily. By the end, Ethan could hardly believe it. His hands trembled. He hadn't died once. The notifications never stopped. He could feel his body had nearly doubled in power. Facing zombies now would be even easier. Ding! Game cleared. A sudden voice jolted him. Ethan blinked, stunned. He hadn't actually beaten Super Mario. Even with his old skills, he'd never heard of anyone fully clearing it. Does the strength boost have a limit? He frowned, puzzled. The mutated phone's functions were a mystery, and it offered no explanations. It left him frustrated, but the phone didn't give him time to dwell. The game screen shut off. Ding. Tutorial game cleared. System rebooting. Estimated time, 5 minutes. The phone went black. Ethan's confusion deepened, but with a 5-minute wait, he was powerless to do anything. He lit another cigarette, the smoke filling the room as he waited. For the first time, 5 minutes felt like an eternity. With no clock in the apartment, he couldn't track the time. It felt like half an hour had passed. Ding! The phone's screen flared to life. Ding! Tutorial mission cleared. Performance rated A. Ding! Obtained gene serum. Ding! Unlocked game store access. Ding! Unlocked automatic game download access. The cold, emotionless voice flooded his mind with notifications. It was the first time, outside of gameplay, that the system had spoken so much. Ethan eagerly checked the phone screen. The battery was still at 32%, unchanged. This confirmed that as long as he didn't start a game, the battery wouldn't drain. That was good news. The Super Mario app was gone from the screen. In its place was something resembling a digital app store. This puzzled Ethan. It seemed that once a game was cleared, it vanished from the phone, meaning he could no longer use it to boost his strength. Ethan clicked his tongue, a bit disappointed, but he quickly regained his composure. His current strength was already comparable to a top-tier athlete, yet without the bulky muscles. On the outside, he still looked somewhat scrawny. No one would guess that beneath that unassuming frame, Ethan could unleash punches with nearly 500 pounds of force. He could lift his couch single-handedly with ease. Ordinary people, he could toss them around like rag dolls, no effort required. If he could keep growing stronger, it'd be almost too much. But the human body had limits. There had to be a ceiling to how much his strength could increase. Ethan shook his head, pushing the thought aside. He focused on the new App Store icon and tapped it. Opening the store didn't consume any battery. The interface looked like any typical phone app store. A colorful array of apps filled the screen, mostly games. Temple Run, Double Dragon, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. All mobile games. But as Ethan scrolled further, he was shocked to see League of Legends, PUBG, Dungeon Fighter. Even online games were there. His excitement spiked. If Super Mario had given him this much power, what could clearing these games do? Could he eventually become unstoppable in this apocalypse? Would hordes of zombies pose no threat at all? But every game was grayed out locked. Clearly, they couldn't be downloaded yet. Only one game was lit up, Temple Run. Ethan frowned. Downloading these games likely required specific conditions. For what he could tell, it was probably tied to the phone's battery, meaning he needed to kill more zombies to charge it. Super Mario took 20% battery per run. Ethan wasn't naive enough to think every game would be the same. These weren't ordinary games, they enhanced his strength. The exact download conditions would require further investigation. Without hesitation, he tapped to download Temple Run. Ding! Insufficient battery. Unable to download. The cold, emotionless voice rang out again. Ethan froze. As he'd suspected, downloading required more zombie kills to charge the phone. Did it need a full 100% battery to unlock? He tried questioning the voice in his head, but as always, it gave no response. Everything depended on him figuring it out. It's forcing me to hunt zombies, Ethan realized. Originally, he'd planned to stockpile food, build up his strength, and find a safer place to hole up. But now, it seemed he couldn't leave yet. The zombies outside, terrifying to others, were his only way to grow stronger. He needed to rack up battery charge to unlock new games. Ethan couldn't help but wonder. Super Mario boosted his strength, so what would Temple Run give him? Extract gene serum? This time, the prompt appeared on the phone screen, not in his head. Ethan tapped extract. A small, thumb-sized crystal vial filled with deep blue liquid materialized before him. He opened the gene serum. It was odorless, uncertain of its effects. He didn't hesitate and downed it in one gulp. It tasted like plain water. Ethan began to wonder if it was a dud. But just as the thought crossed his mind, a warm current surged through his body. It was gentle, spreading slowly through his muscles, bones, and veins. His pores opened, and a soothing warmth enveloped him, like soaking in a hot spring. Ethan tilted his head back, eyes half closed, savoring the sensation. It lasted about 10 minutes before fading. He checked himself, expecting some dramatic change, but felt nothing obvious. His strength seemed unchanged, and he noticed no physical improvements. Was it really a fake? Then he caught it. He'd grown about 2 centimeters taller. He used to be 5 feet 10 inches, but now his clothes felt slightly tighter. His skin was smoother, almost glowing. Even his features had subtly refined, making him better looking. His appearance had improved noticeably. The changes were subtle. Without close inspection, he might have missed them. The gene serum's true effects would take time to understand. He didn't dwell on it. Rest tonight, then start hunting zombies tomorrow. A plan formed in his mind. His first goal: clear every zombie in the apartment complex. Morning light filtered through the thick curtains. Ethan opened his eyes, gone with a gnawing hunger and weakness. His clothes were even tighter than yesterday, practically unwearable. His pants were too short, exposing his ankles, despite yesterday's intense exertion. Beneath his clothes, lean muscles rippled subtly. The belly fat from years of staying indoors was gone. His physique was sleek, powerful, like a predator's, both functional and striking. His features were sharper, more refined. If he'd once been decent-looking, now he was undeniably handsome. Joy flickered in Ethan's eyes. He finally understood the gene serum's purpose. But that seemed unrealistically intense. The human body was a complex mystery with untapped potential. Altering genes wasn't so simple. The serum was likely still working, slowly optimizing him. Ethan was already thrilled with the results. In the apocalypse, looks weren't everything, strength was. But who'd complain about looking better? He rummaged through his closet, pulling out looser athletic where that fit his taller frame. It allowed freer movement, maximizing his strength. The sportswear hugged his form, accentuating his physique. And paired with his sharper features, he radiated an undeniable charisma. Ethan grinned, satisfied. Grabbing his cleaver and rolling pin, he packed a backpack with some food and water, then headed out. His goal: fully charge the phone. The complex teemed with zombies. Clearing them all would take time, a gradual process. Looking at his makeshift weapons, Ethan mused that he needed something better. With his current strength, a proper weapon would make regular zombies no threat at all. He also needed new clothes. His old ones were too small, and forcing them on would restrict his movements. Not worth the hassle. With a creak, he opened the door. No zombies waited outside. Ethan moved quietly downstairs. He wanted to hunt zombies, but that didn't mean drawing a crowd with reckless noise. That'd be no different from suicide. He had a plan and would stick to it. Though a typical shut-in, Ethan preferred weighing pros and cons logically. His building, cleared yesterday, was free of new zombies. Only a couple of stragglers had wandered in, aimlessly shuffling with decayed faces. But when they caught Ethan's scent, their expressions turned feral. He didn't give them a chance. A single swing of the rolling pin pulverized a zombie skull. Another swing dropped the second. Since clearing Super Mario, Ethan's strength was at an absurd level. Zombies, once predators, were now his prey. Checking his surroundings, he pulled out the phone. The battery was at 34%. Just as he'd hoped, he continued hunting lone zombies. Stragglers were the easiest targets, low risk, high reward. It was the safest approach for now. A zombie horde in the thousands would overwhelm him, no matter how strong he was. His stamina had limits. By noon, with the sun blazing, zombies were at their weakest. It was Ethan's perfect window, and he wouldn't waste it. Starting from his floor, he swept through a few hundred meters around the complex, hunting relentlessly. His phone's battery climbed rapidly. Soon, it hit 100%. Ethan pulled it out, tapping to download Temple Run. Ding! Insufficient battery. Unable to download. The cold voice made his brows knit tightly. What was this? The battery was full. Why couldn't he download Temple Run? Thud, thud, thud. A faint sound interrupted his thoughts, someone tapping glass. Ethan looked over and saw the girl from yesterday, frantically signaling for help. She looked worse than before. her face even more haggard. Clearly, she was at her breaking point. Emily Tran was teetering on the edge of despair. She never could have imagined that an apocalypse, a real, world-ending catastrophe, would actually happen. When zombies swarmed the streets, tearing into people, Emily felt like her mind was unraveling. But she hid in her apartment, choosing to cling to life. She didn't want to dwell on it, but deep down, she knew her parents were likely gone. They hadn't come back in all this time. Still, Emily held onto a sliver of hope. In a crisis like this, she believed the government wouldn't abandon its people. So she stayed put, rationing her food, which could last about a month. A month was nothing in normal times. Gone in a flash. But now, with no electricity or water and the constant pressure of zombies outside, every moment was suffocating. Each day dragged on like a year. She counted the days, barely holding on. But as the month wore on, her food supplies dwindled. The faint hope in her heart began to fade. Her rational mind told her the government was likely overrun. The very idea of a nation erased. Zombies were the new kings of this world. She didn't want to believe it, couldn't accept it, because she knew if that hope died, so would her will to live. She was just a frail young woman. Despite her stunning beauty, which had drawn countless admirers her whole life, looks meant nothing in this apocalypse. Zombies didn't care about her appearance. Food was everything, so Emily kept waiting. Her supplies grew scarcer. Though she rationed carefully, they eventually ran out. After 2 weeks without food, she could scrape by for a few days. But when her water ran out, death would be inevitable. She'd wrestled with the idea of going out to scavenge, driven by hunger. She faced reality. Waiting for someone to save her was a pipe dream. To survive, she'd have to leave and find food herself. But every time she made up her mind, she froze at the door. Zombies lurked just outside, their terrifying roars jolting her awake in the dead of night. To leave, she'd have to deal with them. There was no other way. How could she summon that kind of courage? But yesterday, on her second day without food, she saw a glimmer of hope. Ethan Lee's appearance turned her world upside down. A guy like him, a typical reclusive nerd, was someone she'd never have noticed before. She didn't even know he lived in her complex. But his arrival rekindled her hope. Ethan was incredibly strong. His speed, his power, his decisiveness, they were unreal. In her eyes, the terrifying, ferocious zombies were like tofu in front of him. One hit, and they crumpled. She knew it wasn't that the zombies were weak. Ethan was just that powerful. He faced them with calm, unshakable confidence. Without a second thought, Emily signaled for help. She'd seen him walk out of the convenience store with bags overflowing with supplies. Food wasn't an issue for him. If he'd save her, the zombies at her door would be no problem. But to her shock, Ethan only gave her a cold glance and kept walking. In a moment of desperation, she made a bold choice. She offered herself, everything, if he'd rescue her. In the face of survival, nothing else mattered. And she'd seen his strength. Sticking with him in this apocalypse meant safety, freedom from the zombie threat. Society had collapsed. In any world, women gravitated toward powerful men. Before, it was men with wealth, controlling resources. Now, it was men with strength who ruled. Ethan wasn't bad-looking either, clean-cut, around her age. He was an ideal choice. Aligning with a man like him wasn't shameful. It was something to take pride in. Emily was smart. She knew her beauty and figure were irresistible to men. But Ethan crushed her hopes again, disappearing without a second glance. That night crawled by agonizingly. Emily felt herself fading, too weak to go on. But the next day, Ethan reappeared. He was her last lifeline. She knew if she didn't seize this chance, all hope was gone. She'd run out of water that morning, her third day without food. Dizzy and on the verge of collapse, she needed food. She needed Ethan to save her. When their eyes met, she finally saw him clearly. His hair was messy, but his features were strikingly handsome. If they'd met before, she'd have remembered him. She even regretted not connecting with her neighbors sooner. Maybe things wouldn't have come to this. Ethan was covered in blood, his expression cold. Her pleas seemed to have no effect. Just as despair crept in again, she noticed something astonishing. Ethan was walking toward her. Beneath her haggard appearance, Emily Tran's stunning beauty still shone through, now lit with a spark of joy. She was beyond thrilled. No one could fully grasp the feeling of clawing back hope from the depths of despair. For her, at least, it was something she never wanted to experience again. In this apocalypse, life was the cheapest commodity. Ethan Lee strode toward Emily's door. When it came to women, especially someone as striking as Emily, he wasn't one to push them away. Before, he'd been too focused on boosting his own strength to bother with her. But that didn't mean he was immune to desire. As a reclusive guy, he had his own needs. Ethan clearly remembered what Emily had written in her plea for help. Her offer was unmistakable, and he wasn't clueless. In this apocalyptic world, everyone was on edge. Living alone for so long, under such intense pressure, could fray anyone's mental state. A woman was the perfect balm for that strain. Ethan wasn't about to say no. He approached her door, where 5 or 6 wandering zombies spotted him and lunged with feral hunger. But Ethan was unfazed, wielding his rolling pin and cleaver with precision. Zombie blood, reeking of decay, splattered across the ground. In under a minute, every zombie lay dead. The area around her apartment was now almost entirely cleared. Emily, watching through the peephole, saw Ethan dispatch the zombies with ease. Her heart leapt. She'd chosen the right person. With his protection, surviving this apocalypse would be so much easier. She flung the door open. Ethan didn't hesitate, stepping inside and locking the door behind him. The room fell into an awkward silence. Neither spoke. Emily studied Ethan while he scanned her apartment. Being on the first floor, it was spacious, about 2,000 square feet with lavish decor. It was clear that before the apocalypse, Emily's family had been well off. Her silk pajamas, though worn, were clearly expensive, but few would notice the pajamas over her figure and face. Emily was so weak from hunger that opening the door had drained her last reserves of strength. Her striking eyes locked onto Ethan. A faint smile crossed his face as he pulled some food from his backpack. Basic stuff: smoked sausage, crackers, bread, and a bottle of water. "Eat," he said, holding it out. Emily blinked, almost in disbelief. "This is for me?" Before, she wouldn't have given this food a second glance. But now, it held a deadly allure. Her mouth watered uncontrollably. "Yeah," Ethan nodded, plopping down on her genuine leather couch without ceremony. Emily didn't hesitate. No one could resist food like this in her state. "Thanks," she said with a weak smile, tearing into the packaging. She wanted to maintain her poised, goddess-like demeanor in front of Ethan, but hunger won out. She devoured the food like a starved animal. Soon, the pile was gone. A satisfied smile spread across her face as she took a sip of water, savoring the long-lost feeling of being full. In this apocalypse, that was true happiness. When she looked up, she caught Ethan watching her. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. The empty wrappers on the table, enough for 1 or 2 days in normal times, betrayed her ravenous hunger. She hadn't been able to hold back. A flicker of worry hit her. What if Ethan judged her for eating so much? In this world, food was everything, the ultimate currency. Even someone like Ethan, with his strength, likely valued it above all else. If he thought her appetite was too much and decided to abandon her, what would she do? Panic crept in. "Wait a second," Emily blurted, grabbing the water bottle and hurrying to the bathroom. Ethan raised an eyebrow, puzzled. About 5 minutes later, she emerged, transformed. The grime and exhaustion were gone. She'd even applied light makeup. Her already gorgeous features now looked radiant, almost ethereal. Emily was around Ethan's age, in the prime of her youth, exuding a pure, vibrant energy with a hint of mature allure. The combination was magnetic. There was no denying it. Emily was a knockout, the kind most men couldn't resist. Ethan was no exception. His eyes narrowed slightly, unapologetically taking her in, admiring her captivating figure and angelic face. Emily was sharp. Despite the scarcity of water, she knew what Ethan wanted. She'd used the precious water to clean herself up, all to appeal to him. To survive, she needed to stay by his side. She'd realized this yesterday. Though Ethan hadn't said anything, his silence only made her more anxious. She had to secure his loyalty, and the only way was through her body. "Am I pretty?" she asked, her fair cheeks tinged with a shy blush. It was the boldest she'd ever been. Ethan nodded but said nothing.